You're watching FanTeam Daily, a podcast by WhoScored.com. Hello, welcome again to FanTeam Daily, the fantasy football show that could help you win real money with your football knowledge. On FanTeam Daily, we'll be looking at the Premier League Fantasy Football Tournament, which has a minimum guaranteed prize pool of £1 million and a guaranteed first place prize of £200,000. Time for me to introduce my panel again, and we've got a bit of a change this time up. WhoScored's Jake Gallagher is joining us. Lynn is on the bench. Jake, how are you? How did you fare in the Euros?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Did okay in the Euros game.
Yeah.
A small profit, which I was pleased with. Paid for my entry to this one. So yeah, very, very happy with that. You might notice I came down with a serious case of Euros fever during the tournament. I went for the Phil Foden on the final, the eve of the final, and I thoroughly regret it now. But here we are.
You regret it, but you kept it, and I think you probably quite secretly like all the comments and stuff you get about it, right?
I'm rocking it.
Rocking it, yeah, that's right. Well, thanks, Goldilocks. Ben Dinnery is with us again. Ben, how you doing?
Very, very good, my friend. Great to be back again. Show number 3. Looking forward to smashing it out of the park.
Not bleaching your hair in honour of Jake joining us?
If I did have any thoughts about doing so, Jake has, taken that off the table completely.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jake.
It's quite good, actually, that he's done that. Right, so what is FanTeam Daily and what is this show that we're doing about? FanTeam have a Premier League fantasy football game and the guaranteed prize pool is £1 million. It's £20 to enter, and you can enter with multiple teams, which is great if you want to try a few different strategies like our resident differential Dinnery. The game is quite similar to FPL. There's not too much to explain in terms of the rules and scoring, but we will do that as we go throughout the series. Jake, what's coming up?
Yeah, so FanTeam Daily, there's 5 shows, all released on YouTube. This is the third show of 5. In shows 1 and 2, you guys have already assessed the premium options. You've done the budget picks. Today's show will be slightly different. We'll be looking at the perfect squad that you can possibly assemble for the £100 million given based on the WhoScored Player Ratings from last season, which will be quite nice to think. And then later on in the show, one lucky person will get a free entry to the game. We'll have a trivia question, so stick around for that one.
So given that it's the perfect squad, it's probably going to be quite a short show, right? We're all going to agree and move on and wrap it up nicely after 5-10 minutes.
Let's see.
Right, so on the screen, you should be able to see the top-rated players from WhoScored last season. Jake, as you're the resident WhoScored man, I will hand it over to you to explain it.
Sure. So yeah, on the screen, we've got our squad. You might notice in the top left, we've got 9 million over budget. So what I did at the start of this was just put in all the players that are just the top rated players, no budget in mind, just go for it. We came 9 million over, quite a lot of money over actually. So I just take you through my thought process of how we got to that, taking that 9 million down. First of all, just take you through a team. So in goal, we had Emi Martinez, and on the bench, Ilham Meslier. Our defenders, João Cancelo, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Luca Dean, and on the bench, Kurt Zuma and Solly March. In midfield, Kevin De Bruyne, Jack Grealish, Bruno Fernandes, Thomas Souček, and on the bench we had Mason Mount. And up front, quite a strong front line, Harry Kane, Mikel Antonio, and Ollie Watkins. So I wanted to just to talk you through how we took the money off first. So obviously every good fantasy manager will know that having that much money on the bench is a big no-no.
Just before you do, I just want to Zuma and Solly March. I couldn't believe it when I saw Solly March made it into the best team of the season.
Indeed.
I mean, he had a good season, but he had quite a nasty injury, didn't he? So he didn't play as much as I would have liked him to as a Brighton fan.
I think when he did play, he was good, and obviously he's injured quite a bit. But he's not a real budget option on this, so he's got to come out along with the rest of the bench. So we went for Ben Foster instead of Ilham Meslier. That saved us £1 million. Ben Foster didn't play in the Premier League last season, I know, but of all the options in goal, of the 4 million goalkeepers, he was a standout pick. And really, in this side, Emi Martinez is going to play 38 games for Villa this season, so we don't really going to rotate there. And then we went for 3 playing bench options. So Liam Cooper from Leeds, Wesley Fofana of Leicester, who he has to come out now after that horrible leg break last night. And then the last one, I won't spend too much time talking about Oriol and Mayo. They're all 4.5 million, those guys. That brings us to 104 million. So we need still 4 million to chop off. So I took the executive decision to take away Harry Kane. He's the most expensive striker on the game by some distance. And we know that he's probably not going to play game week 1 due to the transfer saga. He's probably not going to be fit enough either. We don't know if he'll play for City or Spurs. And he certainly won't be playing that first game. City actually plays Spurs, so that's probably one reason why he wouldn't play. But he might not be fit enough for game week 2 or 3 either. So he came out, and that means we had 8 million to spend. And rather fortunately for us, the next highest rated striker was Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So there we go, £100 million, and that is our team. I'll open up the floor for you to shoot it down or agree. Let's start with the goalkeepers. Ben, go for it. Martinez and Ben Foster.
Martinez, he was in my squad last year when he was at Arsenal. At the time, I hoped just to flip-flop between him and Leno, whoever Arteta went with. He then moved to Villa and destroyed my season because I couldn't get it right and I rotated goalkeepers. Standout performer, cannot be underestimated. His contribution in taking to Villa where they were in the league. It seems an obvious pick, and at a price point, I'm happy to spend 5.5 on him. Me personally, I may be inclined to just push that 0.5 more and go Edison. I just think with that City backline, defensively, you know exactly what you're going to get. Villa, it's the loss of Jack Grealish cannot be underestimated. They brought some great signings in, but, it's going to take a little while for that team to gel. We also, don't know how they're going to perform in the Premier League. We have very little data on the likes of Buendia from his first season with Norwich. Championship, great, but can he make that step up? And I think attacking-wise, if Villa don't click and ease the pressure on the rest of that team, then maybe it might have a little bit of an impact on that back four because they didn't finish the season as strong defensively as they did, at the beginning of the campaign.
I like the Edison shout. I think he was top scoring goalkeeper. Just in front of Martinez. And I think he was quite high on FanTeam's top scoring players overall as goalkeeper. Had that penalty save, of course, in the last game of the season, which, as we know, Josh won thanks to that.
On penalties as well, Jake.
Yeah.
Maybe one day.
Honestly, one day. I've got to have him that day that he takes that penalty. I mean, 2 lower priced options that you may want to consider. Both Jordan Pickford at 5 million. Didn't have a great season at Everton last year, but still a third of his game kept clean sheets. And then, with the introduction of the new manager, Rafa Benitez, that he's going to set up quite defensively. He's going to build that solid foundation. So, we expect that Everton defence to be a little bit tighter. And also dropping down a little bit further, 4.5 million, Robert Sanchez, which Az will be pleased with, had some great underlying stats. He kept clean sheets or shutouts in more than a third of his games, 37%. And one day you hope that Brighton will perform somewhere near their underlying stats. Year on year, we talk about they're just nice. Yes, this year might be that year.
Martinez, Martinez obviously best goalkeeper in the league last year by a country mile. I think Meslier was probably the one that I would have said got close. So it's good to see that's borne out in the WhoScored rankings. I think in terms of FanTeam, I'm looking at goalkeepers who make a lot of saves rather than going for the premium picks. So I think because they get more points per save than we see maybe in some other games, I think the promoted goalkeepers, for example, might be good shouts. I like the Backman and Foster double up. I like Sanchez, like Ben's mentioned. We could even see someone like Raya do quite well at Brentford, or Guaita at Palace is bound to make loads of saves given they've got like a whole new squad and team almost. So I think I'm going the other way to Ben, and I'll probably be prioritising the much cheaper goalkeepers.
Yeah, I think I'll go for a cheap keeper as well. I'm the fourth highest rated keeper on the WhoScored ratings, Martin Dubravka. He came in for Carl Darlow about half through the season. He's only 4.5, had a good rating, and I think he'll save a lot of shots, so not too bad.
If you're looking for a really, really cheap option for the start of the season, given the fact that Dubravka suffered that foot injury, had surgery, so he's going to miss out. Carl Darlow suffering from COVID, only involved in light training at the moment, so he's away from the main group. That throws Freddie Woodman into the mix at 4 million. So he may get 3 games out of Woodman up until that international break, quite possibly.
Yep, and should make a load of saves as well, given that it's Newcastle.
Yes.
So coming into defence then, so we've got 3 sort of big name players here. So price defense, Cancelo's there, Wan-Bissaka and Dean. I think Wan-Bissaka's the one that I was surprised to see, I think out of the three, maybe even Dean as well. I wouldn't have thought Dean would featured that highly on the scoring chart. I don't think he had a particularly good season. Everton were terrible, especially at home. Cancelo to me was probably the best defender in the league, but very rarely registered the attacking returns that he was capable of. Joe, what do you think about the defence here? Were you surprised with Wan-Bissaka and Dean?
Yeah, I mean, I know the WhoScored rating quite well, so I think I wasn't surprised with Wan-Bissaka. He makes 1,000 tackles a game, and it rates highly. And with Cancelo and Dean,
so is it based on certain key stats then that take this that create the rating?
Everything they do, everything they do on the football pitch.
Yeah.
So pass accuracy, cross accuracy, everything, and that's why Luca Dean really and Cancelo are high here, because they pass accurately. At times can be assist magnets. And similarly with Wan-Bissaka, he just makes so many tackles and important tackles, which gets rated highly too. So yeah, I actually quite like this the back three. I think they'll certainly Dean and Wan-Bissaka will play the majority of games, I would suggest, unless they're injured. So they're not really rotatable, those two guys. So I'm quite pleased. Would
you consider Wan-Bissaka over Shaw? I mean, he's 0.5 less, but the same price as Maguire. Where would you rank him in terms of those three?
I'd have Harry Maguire over Wan-Bissaka, I think, just because he would be. You could probably suggest that Harry Maguire is almost like a set and forget defender. Like you have a set and forget goalkeeper, you could suggest that Maguire is a set and forget defender. He just plays every game. He'll play that opening game of the season, no doubt. Yeah, he did go to the Euros final, So I would prefer Shaw, but I think FanTeam have priced him nicely, a little bit higher than Wan-Bissaka and Maguire, because it makes you make that decision. So yeah, I like the addition of Wan-Bissaka in this team, but for me, I go for Maguire. If
tackles were rewarded on FanTeam, I think we'd definitely be picking Wan-Bissaka. But given they're not, I think,
no doubt.
Yeah, the extra goal threat of Maguire probably takes me. Ben, what do you think about this back three? Any of those in any of your FanTeam drafts?
I do like Cancelo. He obviously, the flexibility in that he can play on the right, the left, or a little bit higher up the pitch. Seemed to fall out of favour a little bit towards the end of last season, which was a slight concern. And Pep, if he is to be believed, so we'll take that with a pinch of salt, that Zinchenko may be starting on the left. So the worry and the concern, as always, with Guardiola is, this rotation risk. So for me, if I was looking at that City backline, it might be Ruben Diaz. Doesn't offer the same threat, certainly from goal scoring or assist-wise. But for me, he is that set and forget City player. And we're talking about, he doesn't offer the offensive returns, but defensively, City are going to be there or thereabouts. They're probably the best in the league. With United and Wan-Bissaka, I wouldn't go anywhere near Wan-Bissaka. I've mentioned it on a previous podcast that Maguire would be my go-to. I think bringing in that set piece coach during the summer is a big indication that where Ollie, sees he's going to target, and I think it's probably going to be Bruno on those set pieces with Maguire on the end of it. And there's two sort of curveballs that I'm looking at. Ryan Bertrand. I think he's went under the radar, got a lot to prove in his move at Leicester. He comes in at 4.5 million, so he's very cheap. You're not spending a lot of money there. But also Kieran Tierney. Now, second half of last season, Arsenal performed top 5 defensively for shutouts and in the data. So I think that, not a lot of people actually realise that. And in terms of Kieran Tierney, not only are you getting those defensive returns, but he loves to go forward as well. He averaged, over 1.29 key passes a game, and he was creating 2.27 shots per 90 as well. So you're getting a little bit of both with him. And Tierney at 5 million as well is another good option for me.
Yeah, you've got to think Ben White, big signing from Brighton, is going to strengthen that back line. As well. Great pass of the ball as well. He probably fits sort of Arteta's philosophy of passing it out from the back. So I think it's going to benefit Arsenal in general, really make them more in the style that Arteta wants to kind of implement. I really like Tierney as well. Okay, so moving on to midfield. So De Bruyne is there. We got a new City boy just announced just about 5 minutes before we came live on this podcast. Grealish, £100 million, now a City player. Fernandes, and Tomas Souček. So just a few points from me. De Bruyne, I thought, underperformed fantasy-wise last season. He didn't seem to register the normal kind of attacking returns that we kind of expect from him. But I'm not surprised to see him on this list because he still had a great season, even if it doesn't always translate to the points. Grealish was unbelievable when he played. Fernandes, I don't even need to talk about what an incredible season, particularly the first half. And Souček as well. I mean, this is a very, very strong midfield there. But Jake, there is a glaring omission from this midfield. Tell us why Mr. Mohamed Salah is not there.
Yeah, so like I say, the elephant in the room. Mo Salah is actually, I think he was 32nd on the list of top-rated players last season. So he's nowhere near this. He was nowhere near even the alternative options. And I've got some reasons, got defence for that. So in terms of his goals last season, 6 out of 22 were penalties. And that's nothing bad, of course, especially not in fantasy football. Like a penalty goal is a goal. Like they all get the same points, so it doesn't really matter. But in terms of our algorithm and our top-rated list, penalty goals are weighted a little bit lower. So he actually only scored 12 from open play, and that excludes counter-attacks. If you want to compare that to some of the players in around him, so Patrick Bamford had 14 goals from open play, Sonny had 12 from open play, and even Ilkay Gundogan had 11 goals from open play last season. So it does suggest a slight decline in his performance. The other thing to note is that as well as the defence struggling because of all the injuries they had last season, that did translate further up the field. And they struggled certainly to sort of break down defences and open up defences. And Salah is usually the key man in that area. But last season was actually his worst at Liverpool in terms of the amount of key passes he's making per game and the amount of dribbles he's making per game. So his overall performance, his overall influence was definitely a bit less. Still good, don't get me wrong. It's still, still good for a human being's level. But for Mo Salah's level, it definitely points to a decline in performance. Like this season now will be his 5th at Liverpool. His WhoScored rating in his first season at the club was 7.69, which is outstanding, by the way. That season he got 32 goals in the Premier League. That's not been beaten since, and that's the best tally since Alan Shearer in 1995. So it gives you an idea just how good he was that season. But since then, we've had 7.57, a slight decline, 7.40, another slight decline, and then last season a quite substantial decline, 7.07. Right now, I'm not saying Mo Salah is a bad fan team option. He'll be in my team. If you could arguably say that Mo Salah is the best option, especially given Liverpool's opening fixtures, are you captaining him? That's plum fixture for Mo Salah captaincy away to Norwich. He'll be in my team, but that is the defence as to why Mo Salah isn't in this squad.
Do you know what's even more remarkable about that? The fact Fernandes is in the squad. I mean, Fernandes got 13 penalties last season, 1 free kick, scored 26 goals. So, if he gets a lower weighting for those, but he's still featuring there, it just shows the influence he had in other parts of the game, right?
Sure. So you still get positive performance for scoring penalties. Of course you do, but Bruno Fernandes would have done many more passes. Exactly. His pass accuracy is a lot higher. So it's just that kind of thing. Like he's just more involved in the game, whereas clearly Salah's all about scoring goals. And I've got an actual theory about Salah. My final point on Salah. In the future, I can see him doing a bit of Cristiano Ronaldo in the coming seasons, becoming more of like a pure poacher. As he gets older, I think and he wants to continue playing at the top level, like well into his 30s, just like Ronaldo has. I think he'll just go further forward into that central striking role, that poacher's role. And it's got another similarity with Ronaldo as well. They look after their bodies off the pitch incredibly well. I just think that I can see that's what way Salah might go and become more of a poacher and be that player that gets you 30 goals a season but doesn't do too much else.
Yeah, like a kind of Jamie Vardy type as well.
Yeah,
who's just very good at just hanging off the last man and making the runs. Right, Ben, I'm going to come to you about new City signing Jack Grealish. I don't know if you remember in the Euros, we had the discussion about Grealish, and I believe Jake said that he didn't see him being a small fish in a big pond and thought he'd do better if he stayed at Villa. Well, Jake, Grealish has now moved and he's determined to prove you wrong. Ben and I were very much saying that he could perform. What do you rate of this move to City? How do you rate him from a fantasy perspective, and how do you think he'll fit in at the City side?
Difficult. I'm not sure whether his appeal is heightened because of his move, or it's actually diminished somewhat. I liked him in that Villa team. The big fish in the small pond. Nailed as a starter. 90 minutes more often than not. Almost the sport Billy of that Aston Villa team. If he wanted the set piece, if he wanted the corner, if he wanted the penalty, it was inherently, it was his. It's City. Do I see a little bit more rotation in there? I'm not of the mind. Yeah, they've splashed out 100 million. But is he a nailed down starter week in and week out? I don't think he is. If Pep...
Even for 100 million?
Even for 100 million.
Wow.
Look, what price would you put on Kevin De Bruyne? And, there was a time where you would have said De Bruyne is in that team regardless, but not anymore. I think Pep will be looking to bolster his squad, to manage his players, particularly around the Champions League. So that is a slight concern for me. But what does appeal to a Grealish maybe as opposed to a De Bruyne is his price point. We're talking 7.5 million for a Manchester City midfielder who, we hope, Britain's most expensive signing is going to start more often than not. But like you say, where does he actually come into that team? There are a lot of attacking assets in there. The Fodens, the Bryans, the Sterlings, the Gundogans even, Gabriel Jesus. Does Harry Kane come into that team? Lionel Messi could come into that City squad. With the announcement by Barca that he will be leaving the club. So, I think there's still a few twists and turns, but I'm just a little bit wary of Jack Grealish. But at 7.5, I'm more than happy to take that chance.
Jake, is he going to be in your team?
He won't. No.
Set you up for that.
That's not to say. I did not say I don't rate Jack Grealish. Everyone rates Jack Grealish. Fell in love with him at the Euros again. I just think, certainly from a fan team, a fantasy football perspective, I would prefer him to stay at Villa. But he might get more points, oddly enough, as a City player. But then you just have to take the benchings on the chin, so which can be frustrating. But if you look at the likes of Mahrez, who gets benched regularly, but he's always in the top, 9 or 10 midfield point scorers every season. So if you want it for 7.5, you can take that on the chin. I'm sure you can. Yeah, he won't be in my team at the start. I think he'll be in the same boat as Kane, actually, where he probably won't play the first game of the season just because of his Euros involvement. But certainly a sit and watch. And I think his price point is nice that you can probably bring him in for many of your midfielders you can have in there. So game week, maybe that second game you've got Norwich. Yeah, could be plum then.
I'm either going to start with him or have a way to get him for game week 2. Because I think he could miss that first week, but then be ready and used in against Norwich. And I think all the reports are saying they got him earmarked for this number 8 role, which is where I wanted to see him play for England, but wasn't really trusted there by Southgate. Hasn't really played there for Villa, but Pep, I think, wants to use him in that kind of central area to kind of win fouls and make things happen. I'm really, really excited to see him in a City shirt. I think he's going to be absolutely top class there. So
another thing to note is that if that positional change you mentioned, that might take a few, maybe in a month or so for Pep to drill that into him. So you might not see him so regularly at the beginning. Just as he beds in, as a change position. So he'll definitely be in my team. It's only a week exactly. He'll definitely be in my team at some point this season, but I won't be starting with him.
Yep. What about Souček then? So just the final midfielder here. He's had a price rise up to 6 million now. I mean, he was the kind of enabler last season who actually turned out to be a perfectly viable fourth midfielder for most of the season. Ben, are you a Souček fan? I think he's one of the main reasons why West Ham did so well, and I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with that.
Absolutely not. I expected a big Euros from Souček, and maybe I'm not saying he was poor, but the disappointment of his low points return maybe has tempered my enthusiasm. The loss of Lingard, will be felt by West Ham, and maybe he dropped a little bit deeper in the arrival of Jess Lingard. So maybe we'll see him push up that field a little bit more. Always a threat from set pieces. It's 6 million. Look, again, it's a great price point. Elsewhere in and around that, range, want to throw in maybe Adama Traore Wolves under Bruno Lage, I think that's how you pronounce it, we're expecting a much more attacking Wolves outfit. I mean, Adama Traore didn't return his first assist and goal until April last season. So it was massively disappointing, coming off the back of that season when everybody had been talking about, potentially the £50 million man. He's also got the return of his strike partner, the guy who helped him out on so many, in Raul Jimenez. And so I'm really expecting something big from Adama Traore and Wolves to return back to the form that's seen them perform so well on their first 2 seasons on promotion from the Championship.
Yeah, what do you think about Souček, Jake? Considering I agree about the Euros comment. I think he played a slightly deeper role. Wasn't tasked with really kind of bombing forward like he does for West Ham. But is he someone you're considering?
Definitely. You know how much I love Tommy Souček. He's a better option without Lingard. It is a shame to see him at 6 because last season he was 5, I believe. And that was just so beautiful. 6 is fairer for sure. One thing going for him is that he's in that midfield slot, and midfielders and strikers get 3 points if they finish the game, which is quite nice. And he would never come off. So as long as he doesn't get sent off or suspended or something like that, he'll play 38 games, and that's a decent return before he's done anything else. So I like Thomas Souček. I don't know if I would be so safe. I might be looking at the likes of Buendia is a similar price bracket. Rafinha, I quite like it, 7.5. I know it's a bit more, but Thomas Souček could be a solid pick, I think.
And you make a good point about the appearance points you get. I mean, this team, the WhoScored team of highest rated players, I'd say the majority of these guys are ones that are going to play pretty much every minute. Cancelo, probably the notable one that you never know how many minutes he's going to play. Whether
he's a defender, so you don't get that.
Oh, he doesn't get them anyway. Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah. So the front line are going to be players that play, and these really are the players that you should be targeting. Because I don't know if you heard the stat from last night's show about Dallas. Given if he was reclassified as a midfielder last season, he would have scored more points than as a defender.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Crazy, right? Absolutely crazy. So you've got to change the way you think about some of these players when you're playing for FanTeam compared to maybe some of the other games that you play. So yeah, going for the proper nailed-on players is definitely a tactic that I'm going to be doing.
Lastly, I think Josh Waldridge mentioned that on the when he came on before. Likes of James Ward-Prowse, likes of Pierre Højbjerg. Yep. If you could slot them in as your 4th or 5th playing midfielder, very cheap, and they'll just bring in 3 points minimum every game. You can just rely on that.
He's a big fan of Tielemans as well, because obviously plays and actually has a bit of attacking swagger about him. Cool. So up front, we've got Antonio, we've got Watkins. Now, Watkins is a big one, right? Because we were all stunned by the news of Ings signing. So we're going to talk about him in a sec. And then we've got Calvert-Lewin as well, who's just about made the cut thanks to Kane dropping out. But I think we'll start with Watkins because, I mean, the Ings news took me completely by surprise. And we did talk about it last night. But I think this has definitely changed my drafts. I've taken Watkins out of all of my teams now. I'm too worried about him playing on the left with Ings playing up front. Ben, we talked about them a bit, but do you want to say a bit more about Ings and Watkins and what you think Villa are going to be like next season?
I mean, Watkins wasn't anywhere near any of my drafts, so I never really given much consideration.
Even before Ings?
Nah, I'd just seen other viable options elsewhere. And in truth, Danny Ings wasn't either. But his arrival at Villa Park makes him a lot more appealing. His quality cannot be questioned. Clinical finisher with a lot to prove, still believes that he can deliver at the highest level, and I'm sure he believes he can go on to bigger and better things. Champions League is ultimately what he's going to aim for. The concern will always be with Danny Ings is whether he can keep himself fit.
Yep.
Under Ralph Hasenhüttl, he seemed to develop that level of robustness where Hasenhüttl wasn't afraid to play him 2 or 3 games in a single game week, which really what you need to do now at the highest level. And then he sort of pulled up end of the season, with a couple of issues with regards to his hamstring. So Danny Ings will want to go out there and prove himself, prove his fitness. And that's a big, major, selling point. And I'm very tempted with Danny Ings. At 8 million as well, I prefer him over DCL, certainly.
Yep, I agree. He's in for me. I mean, just adding more and more creativity to the side. There's rumours they're in for Cantwell as well, who just add even more firepower. I mean, I just think there's going to be quite a lot of rotation around the side. But I think if Ings can stay fit, he's going to be the one that benefits most from from all the attacking players they're signing. What do you think? What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, I've got a theory on the Danny Ings signing, actually. And I think the reason behind this signing, particularly out of all of them, shows to me that Villa's aim this season is to become much more tactically flexible. I think they've used this Grealish money really, really well. I think they've signed, let's list them: Ashley Young, Buendia, Leon Bailey, Danny Ings.
Yep.
I love the way that signing was announced as well, just out of the blue. Like the old days. Love that. And they're also highly likely to sign Axel Tuanzebe on loan from Manchester United. This might have actually been done by the time this podcast comes out. And I just want to take you back to the start of last season. So Dean Smith changed Villa's formation slightly from 3-4-3-3, which is a little bit more open. He set them up in a different way, 4-2-3-1, which was much more rigid, and they were much harder to break down, certainly from their previous season where they were actually nearly relegated from the Premier League. I think they identified that as an issue. They shored things up at the back. They bought Martinez, Matty Cash, both had great seasons. I think you could probably conclude that they did that. They shored things up and they stayed in the Premier League quite nicely. Now, to bring you back to the start of this season, if you look at Villa, I think you could possibly comfortably say they can play in a variety of systems now. They could line up in 3-4-3 with Tuanzebe dropping into the back three and their fullbacks getting really, really high up the pitch. I think we saw that. Good example of that was England in the Euros when we played against much tougher teams. And a brilliant example was Shaw's goal in the final. It was Shaw bursting forward, Trippier setting them up. Both fullbacks were really high in that system. And the signing of Ashley Young just covers both fullbacks too. Both Matty Target, Matty Cash. Young as the cover there. So they could also play in a 4-4-2, much easier to explain. Two strikers, Ings and Watkins, real poachers. I think that could be really difficult for some defences. It's a different proposition, two strikers these days. Then they could also go for the 4-2-3-1, which is their formation from last season. They used it almost every game. I think they'd probably play Watkins and Bailey on the wings, and then Ings through the middle. But they could also, lastly, play Ings in behind Watkins, which is something he did for Southampton last season a couple of times. Not necessarily a number 10 role, but sort of as a second striker behind Che Adams. So I just think that really it just made Villa much more tactically flexible and much more able to attack different teams or to defend against different types of teams. Then just to bring this all back to fantasy football, one last moment. I think now that Villa's best option about all their assets will be Emi Buendia. Not only has he got Watkins to look for, there's Danny Ings making those runs too. And I just think both of these players are proven at this level now. So at 6.5, Villa's best option for me is Emi Buendia. Change my mind.
Well, are you not a bit worried that he could operate a lot deeper or end up playing a lot deeper? If they sign Cantwell as well, how are they going to fit all these players in? My concern is
if they sign Cantwell, he's not. If they sign Cantwell, he's not for sure. But I really like the option of Buendia with the two strikers. I think because
Buendia was so successful on the right for Norwich last season, and looking at the WhoScored ratings, I think he's in his stats in the Championship make him the highest rated player, I think, from anyone in the league. Obviously it's a Championship, but it's still a tough league, and he did absolutely smash it, but in a different position. So a bit like Grealish, he might be tasked with a new position. And I'm just a bit concerned that he's going to end up playing a little bit deeper. Ings for me is the one that I back to be the highest scoring player from Villa. I think I'll start with him on any fan team I have. Antonio though, so Antonio is another player. I don't think I've made a draft about him in anything. I just think Europe doesn't start for West Ham until game week 5, and he's the only striker there at West Ham. I think they're going to carry on their form from last season. They've got decent fixtures as well. Differential Dinnery. Antonio is about the most boring player ever, right? Because everyone's got him. I would guess that you've got him as well in any draft you've got. Would I be right?
But as always, the concern is whether Mikel Antonio can stay fit. Highly rated by. Well, this is very true. So highly rated by David Moyes and what he brings to that West Ham team. He was risked, I thought, unnecessarily. Last season, he was rushed back. I think it might have been against Manchester City when he came back from a hamstring injury, thrown straight in there and picked up another niggle, and he was out for sort of 3 weeks. So there's always going to be, again, that injury concern associated with him. But, when Mikel Antonio does play, he offers so much attacking threat. He's a spearhead of that West Ham team. He's got himself a couple of goals at Celtic in the pre-season friendly, so it already looked like he's banging and playing well. So yeah, I really, really do like Mikel Antonio, and the stats back him up as well.
Agree. Yeah, when Ings was signed, my first reaction was to take Watkins out and put Antonio in, but that's been compounded by what Ben said at the start of this with Newcastle's problems in goal. They open up against Newcastle, and I quite like the idea of Antonio in that first game. I'm actually going to St James's Park for that game as well. So having Antonio while I'm in person watching the game against a whippersnapper in goal, I like that.
It's got to be done, right? It's got to be done if you go into the game. That's just, you get so much more enjoyment out of it, I reckon, when you've got to play like that. Okay, so the last one from the 11 here is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Obviously, Benitez is in. Everton have gone from having sort of a world-class manager in Ancelotti and so much hype around them and all these signings to signing the likes of Townsend and Rafa Benitez. And I'm a little bit underwhelmed with what's been happening for them in the transfer window. Let's just put it like that. But obviously, Calvert-Lewin had a great season last year. Ben, are you backing him to really, be on fire again this season under Benitez?
I'm not a Rafa fan. Everybody knows that. Whoever listens to when I'm spouting off, I don't get this. Why he's so worshipped here on Tyneside. I thought his football was dire. I thought the way he set up the team was horrendous. It was boring. I mean, Steve Bruce gets flack, but Steve Bruce has his limitations, and we know exactly what you get with Steve Bruce. With Rafa, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Got rid of Ivan Toney, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not expecting big things from Everton this season, if the truth be known. I mean, you go from Ancelotti and Rodriguez to Rafa, and no, it's the mood in that Goodison camp isn't going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
They brought the manager in against the wishes of the fans. He's been highly critical of the Toffees in the past, and I think especially with the fans come back into the stadiums, that will filter down onto the pitch, and I think Everton could really struggle in those early weeks. And Ancelotti had a lot of belief in Calvert-Lewin. He was really complimentary. He had a belief that he could go and score 20 plus goals in that season. He's a confident player. He thrived on that. He grew in stature, and he really sort of filled that role. Him and Richarlison, I think, were excellent. I don't think you'll get that love from Rafa, and I don't expect Calvert-Lewin to replicate his form of last season.
Now that is a damning verdict of Calvert-Lewin and Everton, if I ever heard one. I agree. I mean, normally I look at the fixtures and I think, what teams can I target? And I think Everton and Liverpool, to me, are the standout teams for having the best fixtures over the opening sort of 6 or 7 game weeks. I'm looking at going with no Everton players, though. I think you're right, Ben. I'm just worried that there's so much negativity already about Benitez coming in, no real activity in the transfer window. They were so poor at home last season. That is absolutely unbelievable. And with fans back, you're expecting that to change. But if the fans are on his back, right from the first whistle, I've got to wonder if he's going to be capable of really turning it around. Jake, what do you think about Calvert-Lewin? Are you thinking about him, or do you think Ings at 8 is more sensible?
No, I like Calvert-Lewin actually. The reason is that their fixtures at the beginning are quite favourable. Even the home game against Southampton to kick off, I think Southampton might struggle this season. And the other thing about Calvert-Lewin, he's got a nice price point. There's a lots of he's 8, and there's lots of good strikers at 7.5. So if you take that punt on him, he's not even a punt, but if you take the gamble on him at 8 and he doesn't come off in his first 2 or 3 games, you've got the likes of Iheanacho, Mikel Antonio, Callum Wilson, Ollie Watkins, Patrick Bamford. There's a lot of options there that you can go to quite quickly and quite easily. So I think I'm going to start with Calvert-Lewin because of their fixtures, and because he'll be a focal point. And I don't actually like the signings that Everton have made, but what it does show what Everton are going to do is get it wide and get the ball in the box to Calvert-Lewin, and he'll be a threat, and he'll be in my team.
There you go. Two against one though, Jake, I'm afraid. But yeah,
it always is, guys. It always is.
Yeah, we like to gang up on you, don't we? So just having a look at some of the kind of alternative options of players who kind of were close but didn't quite make the cut. There's a few that stand out to me. We've talked about Buendia. I won't talk about him again, but he's definitely up there. Rafinha's there as well with a 7.22 WhoScored rating. I'm expecting big things from him this season and for him to really kick on, and Leeds to really kick on. Actually, I think they could challenge for top 6, I think, if they get it right this season. Red Mahrez is there, 7.31. Obviously, the worries of his minutes, but when he plays, he does absolutely incredibly well. And the last one I'm going to mention is Ivan Toney, so a 7.41 rating in the Championship. Obviously, absolutely incredible goal scoring record for them. He's going to be, the absolute focal point of everything Brentford try and do. And yeah, like I said, Benitez got rid of him. I think you'd take him back now, wouldn't you, Ben?
Would I?
Well, not Benitez, Toney, surely.
Look, I think it's going to be a baptism of fire. It's one thing dropping down into the second tier and banging it into the Championship. Will he get those same opportunities in the Premier League? I don't think so. It's, strikers, we all know, thrive on confidence. Have Brentford got the strength and the depth and the capability, to go out and, create the opportunities and steamroll our teams, maybe like they did in the old second division? They could start the season well. It's a tough opening fixture against Arsenal. But, once that little wave of enthusiasm, wanes a little bit and you're getting into the winter and the cold months, maybe they pick up one or two injuries. We'll see. Defensively, I understand they're going to be pretty sound and not akin to the Sheffield United team that came up, in their first season. So maybe some similarities there, but I'm one of the ones that I don't expect Toney to set the Premier League alight. He may get a couple in the first few weeks, Pukki and Andre Gray, as you mentioned. But if he hits double figures for the season, I'd be very surprised.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like you're happy with Joe Linton. You don't even want to go back to Toney and
Geordie Joe. Who wouldn't be? The man's a legend.
I very much disagree with that. Actually, I think Toney is exactly the kind of player that's going to do well in the Premier League. I think Brentford are going to struggle, but I would be very surprised if Toney didn't get double figures. I think he's a circa 10 at least. Jake, what do you think about Toney? Are there any other players in this list that we haven't mentioned that you want to call out?
I like Toney. What I really like about him, actually, he started 47 times last season in the Championship because they went into the playoffs. He doesn't get injured, plays every game, plays 90 minutes. He's one of them for £6 million, I think you can afford for him not to be scoring maybe 2 or 3 games in a row. I know you don't want that to happen, of course, but for £6 million, you can't expect too much. And I think it's a real kind price. And I think it's a kind of enabler. You can kind of do bigger things elsewhere with the addition of Toney in the team. So for once, I get the deciding vote, and it's 2 against 1.
Anyone else? Anyone else on the list you want to mention before we move on?
The list I've got in front of me for the top WhoScored forwards: Gabriel Jesus, Roberto Firmino, Jamie Vardy, Christian Benteke. I wouldn't advocate any of those personally, but they did do quite well on the WhoScored ratings. Certainly wouldn't go anywhere near Christian Benteke. I think Palace will try and be a bit more dynamic this season with a new manager. Vardy's going to be phased out, not necessarily right at the beginning, but I think he'll share minutes with the new signing. I think his name's Daka. Roberto Firmino is on this list. He's never been in any fantasy team I've ever had, and it's not going to change now. Gabriel Jesus might be a good option for the first couple of weeks. And when he plays, he does score, but he won't be in my team. This is not me saying get Gabriel Jesus.
What about, and he'll not be anywhere near you WhoScored this, but Raul Jimenez. I think he's a definite watcher early part of the season. If reports from the club's medical staff are to be believed, they've held Jimenez back. He's not shown any sort of psychological scoring from the injury. He's looking as if he's never had the injury. Yes, he's going to be playing in that protective gear, but he's such an important player to that Wolves team. And under Bruno, if we expect a more attacking Wolves team, then I think it's 7 million. Jimenez is he's on my radar without a shadow of a doubt.
It's good to hear from you, Ben, talking about Jimenez's injury and how you think it's, hopefully won't affect him too much. Because that's the biggest worry, isn't it? Something like that. How is he going to be the same player, especially a player who was so good in the air? And that was kind of such a huge part of his game. And I just worry that he's going to, I don't know, I'm going to wince every time he jumps up for a header or something for the first few weeks. But hopefully it will settle down.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's not talked about a hell of a lot. People talk about you get injured. Physically, can it cope? Can you tolerate it? Yes, you can. But psychologically, I mean, Arsene Wenger talked about the injury to the leg break with Aaron Ramsey, and he said it was 3 years before he actually got that out of his head and he could walk out on the pitch and he had belief in his body, that he could get through the game without any problems. With Jimenez, they're seeing he's heading the ball. They implemented a lot of strategies and techniques in training where, he's been heading the ball now for several months. They started off with sponge balls, light balls, and they've gradually just increased the weight. So, he's probably headed the ball now since, returning to training, probably thousands of times. It's about retraining that mind. And of course, you cannot replicate what happens, during a competitive game, and everybody will be watching and waiting for that first challenge. That big burly centre back, coming in for a challenge with Raul Jimenez. But what they're saying is what they've witnessed is he's not shown any psychological effect whatsoever. He is dying to get out there. He's looking really sharp, and we talk about new signings. Well, Raul Jimenez could be. We're all rooting for him to have a big season and put that injury behind him as well. Jake, anyone else you want to mention, or shall I move on to the competition?
Let's give away a prize.
So Jake mentioned earlier that we're giving away free entries to the game, and we're running a competition every show. All you've got to do is answer a trivia question correctly, write your answer in the comments section and put your FanTeam ID with it. We'll select one right answer at random and give you a free entry to the game. What could be easier? Jake, what is the trivia question?
Right, it's a really easy one this time, but we talked about him a lot. I just couldn't not do this. So which player scored the most points on FanTeam last season? And the clue is he wasn't in the WhoScored 15.
I wonder who that could be.
Joe Linton spoiler.
Joe Linton. I think we all know that it's Geordie Joe. Right. So if you know the answer, put your answer in the comments below and your FanTeam ID, and we will choose a random answer to win a free entry to the game. That's it for us. Thanks everyone for watching FanTeam Daily by WhoScored. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Next show will be formations and strategies for FanTeam, and that'll be live on YouTube on Tuesday, the 10th of August. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Ben, and see you on the next show.
Bye.
You're watching FanTeam Daily, the podcast by WhoScored.com.